What does it mean to be Indigenous? BC painter Jessica Slater struggled with that very question growing up. Slater is another of the Indigenous influencers we are showcasing today, this morning, for National Aboriginal Day, for the platform that she gives to Indigenous youth who are struggling to express themselves.
My name is Jessica Slater. I'm from Ochekwe-CP Cree Nation, and I am Indigenous. I've always been a painter for as long as I can remember. You know, our teachings speak of that each and every one of us are born with a sacred gift. And for me, I wanted to use those gifts to benefit our communities and to sort of rewrite a lot of the conversations that were happening. So Young Artist Warriors is a group that I started in Montreal, and its mandate is to actively honor traditional knowledge and protocol while fostering positive identity through the arts. So I just know for me, like, how much I struggled with identity growing up and feeling like something was missing and feeling shame and guilt and not knowing why. And it wasn't until I connected with my culture that I found out that that experience is common for Indigenous youth. National Aboriginal Day is, I think it's important because it's bringing visibility to our population and our issues and the beauty of our culture. And I think just providing a platform for us to really look at how we are working together and saying, you know, we're going to do this for ourselves.
The search for identity that you heard Jessica refer to, it differs with each person, and we're bringing you those journeys forward today. Slater, one of 18 Indigenous young men and women being highlighted as of today on CBC News as part of an interactive feature on our website. And Duncan McHugh, who is the host of Cross Country Checkup, is here with me on this. Thanks for coming in to talk about it, because we've been playing, well, we played 4. And they're extraordinary stories. Tell us a little bit more about the project itself.
They're such great stories.
They
you know,
are.
Unfortunately, in the news media, so often the stories that we hear about Aboriginal youth are discouraging ones. You know, we hear about the suicides, we hear about the foster children, the deaths, like in places like Thunder Bay. Right. So many sad and upsetting news stories about Indigenous youth. And not to say that those shouldn't be covered, they should be. There's some awful things happening to Indigenous youth in this country. But there are so many Indigenous youth that are doing such encouraging things, such uplifting things, working really hard, succeeding in school, in arts, in technology. And so that was part of the push behind this project. It was started by CBC Thunder Bay last year. Right. I am Indigenous, and it's grown this year. We wanted to expand it, and so we've got 18 profiles there this year. A team from the National, the CBC Indigenous online team has put the stories together from these Indigenous youth across the country. Aaron Paquette is an artist, a writer,
had that
a politician.
Earlier this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's just a remarkable story. Also, you know, this incredible moment that he had on a bridge where he decided to, you know, he wasn't sure which way it was going to go for him, and then now look how he's doing. And then
running for council in Edmonton.
I know.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
And then another one, Autumn Pelletier,
yes.
12-year-old from
Yes.
Aquimakong First Nation. A lot of people saw her when she met the Prime Minister last year. She wanted to bring her water concerns to the Prime Minister. She was so overwhelmed that she choked up and started to cry. She just cares so much about water. But there's a really nice backstory there about this young girl from Wiki who has just dedicated her life to keeping the water traditions alive, and so some great stories there.
12, but you're going to hear when you go online to hear her story, the maturity with which she speaks of the issues. It's extraordinary. So launching it today, and it's online, cbcnews.ca, /IM Indigenous, obviously to coincide with National Aboriginal Day. Lots of news happening on this day, Duncan. It's good to have you here because I need to ask you about other things. The name is going to change. The Prime Minister just announcing this morning that it's going to become National Indigenous Peoples Day. Is that significant? Is that distinction important?
It is important. I mean, terminology matters. That's the bottom line, and it can be confusing. There have been lots of terms over the years: Native, Aboriginal, Indigenous. You know, which one to use. There have been a lot of people that have been concerned that Aboriginal is the only place that you'll find Aboriginal in our legislation is in the Constitution. but that Indigenous is a term that's growing in use in terms of the international context. And so the change, I think, it comes from a push from Indigenous people here in Canada to be reflected, for Canada to become more in line with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It has more of a legal, political context globally. So of course, the Prime Minister committed when he came to office to recognize and adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. A couple of pretty big implications of that. The gist of that document is that Indigenous peoples have a right to self-determination, that when there are developments in their traditional territories, that there should be free, prior, and informed consent. So there's some pretty big implications to adopting the United Nations UNDRIP, as it's called.
Yes.
So this is one more move that the Prime Minister is making toward recognizing Indigenous peoples.
The other talk that's out there today is questioning whether this should be a national statutory holiday. It is in Yukon, first time this year. It is in Northwest Territories, not nationally. And there's a divide over this. Where do you fall?
Well, every day is a good day to be Indigenous, as far as I'm concerned. So every day, but I've worked